Richard Norby, survivor of the Brussels airport bombing in 2016. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Thank you for asking us to be here.
It has been 3 years since the terrorist bombings that killed 32 people, darn near killed you and 3 other missionaries who were with you in that airport bombing. How are you doing now, and how often do you think of the moments from that day?
I'm doing very well. My wife is doing well. Our children that were involved, as you would imagine, are doing well. There's been an emotional healing, there's been a physical healing, and I think the physical healing took part perhaps the first year or so, and then the emotions have come, and I think we're at a very good place, and life has been treating us very well up to this point.
What has gone into that emotional healing? How difficult has it been for you to heal emotionally from what happened?
I think initially, whether it be on the airport floor or in the hospital, I think I had to make a decision from the very get-go that I was going to be a healer. I wasn't going to hold grudges. I was going to come out on top. And once I understood that, and once I understood that we were under the good care of doctors and family, there's never been a castaway or a cast-off or a focus on the perpetrators of what took place. So the emotional healing, I think, at least for me, went quickly, although I was in a coma for weeks. But as I was coming out of it and listening to the story of the hospital in Brussels, I think I was able to manage that and come out of it. For my wife and with the children, I think it was a little more difficult because I didn't have those poignant feelings when I was in the hospital because I was in a coma.
Yeah. At one point, you must have thought this was a nightmare, that what was happening wasn't really real. At what point did you then realize that it was real and that reality set in?
I think initially when that first bomb went off and I found myself sprawled out on the floor and I pushed myself up on my hands, and then 12 seconds later the second bomb went off, I think that's when reality came in. The second part of the reality was shortly thereafter, after the second bomb went off, I reached in my pocket and called my wife, and I explained to her that a terrorist bomb had gone off, that I had a broken leg. And I didn't carry the conversation very long, but I think that was the reality of it, was right at that point. And then when all the people started running out of the airport, and because of the injuries to my leg, I couldn't run, I knew that reality had set in, and at that point, everything was beyond my control. And so I had to settle in there that that was reality.
How close were you to the bomb when it went off?
It's estimated 20 to 25 feet from the first bomb, and the second bomb was down into another corridor. It was something I heard that shattered more windows and ceiling tiles, but it wasn't anything that affected us as missionaries personally.
And when you finally got a hold of your wife on the phone, what was her response? She must have been terrified for you.
She said that as soon as I mentioned her name, Pam, she says, my intonation, she just said something was wrong because I called her sooner than I would normally have called to say I'm on my way home, but she knew immediately something was wrong. And so I just told her there was a terrorist bombing, that I had a broken leg, and she asked about the missionaries, and I looked around and I couldn't see them anywhere. It was just such a chaotic atmosphere. But I think for her it was very, very difficult because she had to settle into reality immediately, and then she hung up the phone, and then reality started to sink in even more.
Where were the other missionaries that were with you?
Well, when we were standing in line, I was standing here, and the 3 were to my left, and so the explosion was somewhere behind us and to our right, but I don't know where they went. I looked around, I could see people laying on the ground. I knew that wasn't the sister missionary. The form of the lady was too tall, but I just couldn't see him. I just couldn't see him. But they were all, I think for the most part, thrown to the ground. Elder Wells might have stood up during the whole thing, but the other 2 were thrown to the ground.
What are your physical limitations now after this bombing, and are you still in pain?
There's no pain associated. My physical limitations, let me start there. My physical limitations are that my left leg was badly damaged. I lost most of the soft tissue below my knee at the very first bomb, at the first explosion. So I've had many surgeries on that and skin grafts. The limitations now are that I wear a brace, I can't run, there's a lot of things I can't do, but I can walk, I am alive. So I feel very fortunate, very blessed to have the limitations I have.
Are you in pain?
But the pain with the explosion and the removal of my soft tissue, it removed the nerves and the lymphatic system. So no, I'm not in pain. When they do surgeries or when they take shrapnel out, they don't need to deaden it, although sometimes they do, but I don't have any pain. We're always having to check my foot for sores or a rock in my shoe, but because I can't feel it. But so there's no pain associated with it.
In the moments immediately after the explosion, the first explosion, what happened there in the airport? Certainly the first responders hadn't gotten there yet. Describe to me what you did, what you saw others do, and saw and felt.
Well, for whatever reason, I knew immediately it was terrorists, and
How did you know that?
I don't know, I like you or others aren't around bombs a lot, but there was something about the cataclysmic effect of that. I knew it had to be more than a water heater that exploded. I just knew it, and I knew immediately people were screaming and yelling and starting to run out, and so I got up from my prone position to run out, and my leg collapsed. And I got up again, and it collapsed again, and then I knew that I was in a difficult setting, difficult situation. I just figured my leg was broken, but I just saw people, I saw ceiling tiles, I saw the little dividers that keep you in line that were tipped over or rearranged, suitcases, but it was the screaming of the people that, and the soot and the black and the lights sparking, that made me realize that we were in a terrorist attack or a difficult situation.
How hard is it for you to look back now? I mean, as you are recounting what happened in the surroundings there, how difficult is that for you emotionally?
I think initially when I came out of the coma and we were back here in Salt Lake City and I had a little more control over what I was thinking, on occasion I would think back on that sound of the bomb and the feeling I had and the fleeing of people, and it would make me nervous. But since then, in the last couple of years, I can recall those incidences, I can listen to the sound of the bomb, I can hear the people, and there's no effect on me. There's no post-traumatic stress. I've never had that. And I just think that was a blessing that I had, along with the fact that I didn't have pain. My wife reminds me I did have pain, but I don't recollect the pain being there. So I think that was quite a blessing not to have that.
How do you account for that kind of peace? People who have been through your kind of a situation have traumatic episodes long afterwards. They suffer from PTSD and have a very difficult time. How do you account for being at peace with what happened?
The accounting for that is that sometime after the second bomb, 12 seconds after the first, I had a thought, a feeling, an impression. It was instantaneous. It didn't linger. And the thought was that God knew who I was, where I was, what had happened, and what I was feeling. The second thing I knew, that He knew everybody in the airport, what they had just experienced, what they were feeling. And with that assurance that I knew that He was in charge, I didn't have to worry about me being in charge or trying to exit a place that I could not exit. And then I had another feeling that doctors would be put in place to mend my injuries. I didn't think I would die. And once I had that assurance, then I could lay there in a peaceful state and I didn't worry about it. I looked at other people. I wanted to get up and hold. I wanted to touch them. I wanted to tell them things would be okay, but it was hard. But it was just a feeling or a knowledge that I was blessed with. And since that time, just a few seconds after it happened, I've never had to worry.
You've had more than 3 years now to contemplate why this has happened. What are some of those whys that you've contemplated, and what conclusions have you made in regard to them?
Well, I've thought off and on about the whys, and sometimes tied with the whys is the why me. We were doing what we were doing as full-time missionaries of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You would think that in any aspect of preaching the good word, whether it be for that particular church or any other church, that there might be an element of protection. But it didn't take me long to realize that this is mortality, that life is that way, that it doesn't matter who you are or what station in life, or if you're a parent or if you're a child, that life is full of difficult times and trying times, and some seem to be on the surface more difficult or more poignant than others. So I almost had to leave that as to why, and instead from that decide to ask myself, what can I learn from it, and who can I reach out and help, and how can I, what's the growth pattern here? What can I do to help others? Because regardless of what you say or what you think will not change the past, it's now how can we face the future in a positive way? Otherwise, we sit and wallow in that particular mire, never getting out of it. And so I chose not to do that. I chose to say, well, if this is what's been given, and if He who allowed it to happen, I ought to say, well, now what can I do with it, and not to bemoan the fact or be critical of the fact that it was me and not someone else.
You mentioned that they put you in a medically induced coma as part of your treatment. What was the last thing you remember before they put you into the coma? What is the first thing you remember once you came out?
When we arrived at the hospital, I remember them taking me out of the ambulance and wheeling me down a hallway. And I remember lots of people and lights. But the last thing I remember is that someone started to cut the pant leg off my left leg off. And then I was administered some painkillers. And then a couple of hours later, I was put in surgery, and then I was induced into the coma. That was on Tuesday, March 22nd. On about Sunday, they started to take the medication away for that coma, but because of the after effects and the continued pain medication, the thing I think I remember first was that our son and daughter came over to help my wife pack and to visit, and I remember them talking to me in very faint, distant voices, but I couldn't concentrate on them, and I wondered why they were here, because Pam and I were serving a mission, and we've got things to do. And then it would ebb and flow, and very few times while they were there for those 8 days do I remember them, but that's the first thing I remember after was them talking to me.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has missionaries and volunteers and employees serving all over the world, some of them in areas that could face a terroristic threat or even an attack. What does the church do by the way of training people like yourself, or at least giving you advice on what to do in those situations?
I don't know what training they do specific to that, but I think our life growing up in the society of our religion, we're trained in lots of ways. We're trained either through scouting or through different youth organizations or adult organizations or the day-to-day routines of what we believe. so that when something like this happens, it isn't for us to say, well, they didn't train us on it. It's how now can we accept this? Because there isn't any place that we can go or you can go that would be free of any kind of adverse effects of life. Life does not allow that now. So I think our training is our beliefs, how we've grown up in the society that we've grown up with, in neighborhoods, with friends. And then when something happens, we learn to deal with it because we've practiced in the past what the present demands of us.
Sometimes those who survive attacks like this or are involved in them as a victim in some way have a premonition that something bad was going to happen. Did you have any kind of premonition at all, either in the moments, hours, days, weeks prior to this happening?
Some people have asked, why would you go to the airport if you knew something was going to happen? And to answer that question, and yours was, I had no premonition, no feelings, no anxiety, because if we had had those, we wouldn't have gone. But so I didn't have any. One of our daughters and my wife had some type of feelings in the weeks prior to this that something might happen. In fact, a week or two prior to this, I was at a table preparing a lesson, and Pam came up behind me and said, Richard, do you think our family's strong enough that if something should happen that we could remain strong in our faith? And I says, oh, I think so. I was getting on with my lesson, but I didn't understand quite what she was saying because I didn't understand what she had been feeling. Mm-hmm. And a daughter had similar feelings. In fact, when she got the phone call from my wife, she woke her husband up and said, Brian, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for or worrying about. But I had no such feelings at all.
So my advice to you is stay close to your wife and to your daughter, children. At the very most, or at the very least. There are those, and we covered this a little bit just a moment ago, but I want to dive into it just a little bit more. There are those who are perplexed that something like this could happen to someone who is trying to do good, trying to serve God, and might otherwise have protection. How do you explain that? How do you reason with someone who would be confused that you would not be protected and spared from this kind of an experience?
I wonder if every time we did good and every time we're on a correct path, whatever that is, that would equate to protection. If that be the case, everyone would do good for the wrong reason, and all the wicked would be punished. But that isn't what life is. And so I think we have to come to grips with that early in life or later in life, that life is what it is and that we're here for tests and trials and difficulties and hardships. But when those come, then how do we handle those? How do we equate that a good person should only receive good in their life and a bad person should only receive bad? But that isn't the plan of life. That isn't how it works. And people do take the challenges and difficulties of life in a different way. And I don't know the reasons why, and I don't know all the rules why. I know why I have found at least peace in this. And yes, sometimes every day when I get ready for the day and I see my scars and my wounds and where the shrapnel was and where the skin grafts were, I want to say, but I don't. I can't say it because I have been so blessed and so given so much. But so discouragement comes. Discouragement often comes to visit, but it's never invited to stay. And I just made that a decision in my life that I was. And it does come, and I want to get out and run with the grandchildren. I want to do some things, but I think of all the things that I can do. And so I have to set those things that I wish I could do aside because I can do pretty much anything I want to.
So when those moments of discouragement come, how do you get back out of that? What is the mechanism you use to keep from inviting discouragement and depression to
Oh, I think
stay?
it might be what I might read, my daily reading, my daily routine of what I watch and what I don't watch. Sometimes I just need to get outside. Sometimes I just have to sit and contemplate and ponder. But those are very few in the moments that I have to do that. It's not like I'm in a drudgery and in a forlorn place. It's not like I have to sit in a dark corner and get out of this. They just come in quiet moments, waves of discouragement, never waves of this isn't fair. I've never had those waves of this isn't fair. You got to be really ticked off at what's going on. I've never had those. I think, well, I've got to deal with this. And then I've got friends that are paraplegics. I've got friends that are in all kinds of conditions in life. And so if I dare start to wonder or think why, I think, oh, well, what about these friends of mine? And I say, oh, I've got it so good. And they're probably thinking the same thing. They've got it so good. So I think there's a comparative nature, number one, that I really do have been given much. And number two, I think the umbrella over all that is that I have come to know who's in charge. And when I've come to know who's in charge, then I've thought, I don't want to ask questions like why me or this isn't fair. I would rather, as I mentioned earlier, ask, what can I learn from this? Who can I help? I just had a good friend diagnosed with a very debilitating, life-threatening disease, and I just want to reach out to her. So I think it's how we face the battles of life.
Those who perpetrated this attack have met whatever fate they were going to meet in death. Do you think of them often, and how do you feel about them personally now?
Two of the three bombers were suicide bombers. The third one escaped. He didn't detonate his bomb. And he and two others have been arrested and awaiting trial. But there again, I've got so many other good things to think about. In all honesty, I haven't paid any attention to ISIS or the terrorists or the bombs that went off. I just can't do that because it takes too much of my time and energy and hate. It would be like drinking poison, hoping the other person to die. And I focus on my wife and our children and our grandchildren and what I can do for the community and for service. But I can't give any time to those perpetrators. And justice will be served, and I'm happy for that. I want them to have fair trials, and I want them to be represented well, and then let the justice system take its course, but I don't follow in any way what they're going through.
How do you explain to your grandchildren what happened? How do you explain the world we live in and what happened to you and how it affects you and your family?
Well, interesting enough, we were at the university hospital, and most of our grandchildren and children's families were there. And we had gone out on a maiden voyage in a wheelchair, and they had to take me from a lift in my bed and put me into this wheelchair and blankets and feeding tube. And anyway, we went around and went outside. And then when we got back into the room, I just had this thought that I needed to call the grandchildren together for that very reason. And in essence, I said, I want you to know that this was not God's fault, that you can never turn your back on Him, that this was a result of some people that made unwise choices, but for them that was their right choice. But it has nothing to do with the fact that bad things happen to good people, because that's what happens. And I wanted to reassure them that in their life, that things would happen to them, and I don't know on a serious scale. I don't know how you measure serious, because whatever's happening to people is serious. But I just wanted them to know that this was in no way God's fault, and that they needed to focus and rely on Him, and then whatever happens in life, I'm making it oversimplified, but they can get through anything that happens in life because they know who they can trust and depend on.
After what has happened to you and to all the others in the Brussels airport 3 years ago, what has that taught you about the world that we live in and about yourself?
I think it was the world we live in has been magnified in my eyes, meaning that the good is getting better and the bad is getting worse. And we have to decide which side we're going to be on. We know what jerseys we should be wearing. We know how the outcome of the game is going to be. And yet sometimes in our life we go out and we try on different jerseys and we try to play different games because it sounds fun and looks good. But I am committed and have learned, I think, what jersey to wear, if I could use that analogy. And that's what my focus is. I'm not a holy saint. I'm just a regular, ordinary guy. But I want to teach our family the critical things of life, that there is bad out there and it's going to get worse, and there is good out there and it's going to get better. And so I think I perceive or look at life as very, very good and very positive. And if we have to set the bad aside, although it's out there, I want to focus on the good, because life really is good. And you surround yourself with good people and good things, and it's a wonderful, wonderful experience.
What did you learn about you through this experience?
I learned that I could endure difficult things. I learned that as the hard times come, that I have to fight through those like anyone else. I learned that I could be resilient, that I don't have to crash and burn because something happens to me. I learned that I could focus my attention on the weightier matters of life. For me, that's family. And that I learned that if we wallow in the mire of life, we'll get stuck there, almost to the point that we won't be able to come out of it. And so there's two decisions we have to make. It's the decision to be a victim or to be a survivor. And you have to choose to be a victim. It isn't just given. You have to choose that. So when this happened, and when I finally got my senses about me, I had chosen to be a survivor. So I decided to act on what had taken place, to be a survivor, instead of being acted upon, which is a victim. And so we can establish victim status in life, whether it's the divorce of a parent. Therefore, I don't know if I want to get married, and if I choose that, then I'm a victim of a divorce. I can be a victim of an accident that took the life of a friend, or I can be a survivor of that setting and say, irregardless of the fact, very painful feelings, but I'm going to be a survivor. I'm going to rise above it. I guess rise above or stay beneath. Victim, survivor.
Well, Richard Norby, survivor of the Brussels airport bombings of 2016. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Privileged to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.